I protect all of my passwords, accounts, and devices using Aura. I get instant alerts about threats, like if my email or password are found on the dark web, so I can fix the problem fast. Try Aura free for 2 weeks using my link below. This is a major story we're starting with today. Republicans have been caught in a series of presentations, audio recordings, and PowerPoints, openly planning to win elections, not by actually winning the hearts and minds of voters and getting people to the polls and winning elections in a real way. They've been caught planning to win by a strategic and concerted effort to just contest ballots, to claim fraud. And this plan in and of itself is a form of voter fraud. We are going to listen to the recordings. We are going to look at what we have learned. And one of the things that I said back in 2020, when 6 months before the November 2020 election, Donald Trump and others started saying, oh, it's going to be fraud. He would say fraud. He would say the paper ballots, the mail-in ballots, absentee, it's all fraudulent. They're going to try to take it. It's going to be insecure. And what I said at the time was, at some point in the future, they are actually going to attempt massive voter fraud. And we're going to call them out. And then they're going to say, oh, come on. You're the guys who said there was no fraud when we were pointing to the fraud in 2020. And that is happening right now. Because remember, with Republicans, with the modern right wing in the United States, every time they make an allegation, we should consider and explore whether it's actually a confession of something they're planning to do. Oh, Hillary can't be trusted with sensitive information. Trump's eating documents, flushing documents, and stealing documents to Mar-a-Lago. When they say the left is doing something, the first question we should ask is, are they actually the ones doing this? Is that how they think it's something someone might do because they are the ones doing it? So they are conspiring to win elections, by contesting ballots of Democrats, not by actually convincing people to vote for them. Explosive Politico report. It's going to be an army. Tapes reveal Republican plan to contest elections, placing operatives as poll workers and building a hotline to friendly attorneys are among the strategies to be deployed in Michigan and other swing states. This is incredibly important stuff to know about now, because if we're not ready to fight this, they could get away with it. Think about, thank goodness they didn't get away with it in 2020. But you could argue that it was a trial run and that they're going to try again. And there's every indication they're going to. Heidi Prisbilla for Politico, quote, video recordings of Republican Party operatives meeting with grassroots activists provide an inside look at a multi-pronged strategy to target and potentially overturn votes in Democratic precincts. They're targeting the Democratic precincts. Install trained recruits as regular poll workers and put them in direct contact with party attorneys. The plan, as outlined by a Republican National Committee staffer in Michigan, includes utilizing rules designed to provide political balance among poll workers, to install party-trained volunteers prepared to challenge voters as Democratic majority polling places, developing a website to connect workers to local lawyers, and establishing a network of party-friendly DAs who could intervene to block vote counts at certain precincts. So here's the strategy, okay? Most polling places, generally speaking, have a system for poll workers and poll watchers. Most of those systems are designed that there be partisan balance. You can't have all Democrats watching a polling place, or all Republicans. The idea would be you have a partisan balance, but these are all just kind of good faith people who are there genuinely to make sure that everything is being done in the correct way. The Republican plan is to take advantage of the rules which say you have to have some Democrats and some Republicans. There has to be balance, and to train the Republican poll workers to understand how to disproportionately challenge Democratic votes by virtue of being in overwhelmingly Democratic precincts, in order to have balance on paper. Listen, we've still got Democratic poll workers and Republican poll workers. It's all fine. But the Republican poll workers that are there not to make sure everything is on the up and up, but they are there because these are left-leaning precincts where they are going to try to help Republicans by challenging votes that will statistically be more likely to be Democratic rather than Republican votes. Being a poll worker, you just have so many more rights and things you can do to stop something than as a poll challenger. So again, the idea here is don't have them there as the obviously partisan poll challengers. Have them there just as regular poll workers who are going to say they're seeing funny business. We have audio recordings. Let's take a listen to one.
Understand that we are upset with the 2020 results, but we cannot just look at the 2020 results, or else the exact same thing will happen in 2022. We need volunteers on the ground on election day, ahead of election day, working so that that fraud does not happen again. If we only look at 2020, it just will happen.
I worked the polls the last election, and not only were we extremely poorly trained, I mean badly trained, but when we caught them cheating, and I caught them cheating, they had a pre-planned thing that they did. They would swarm you, they blocked you from seeing things, they accused you of doing things that you weren't doing, and then they would go like this and have the police come and escort you out.
So that's why we're here now today, 13 months ahead of election day, as opposed to 1 month ahead of election day. So if I could ask everyone just to listen to Matt.
And by the way, the reason that they're saying 13 months is the recordings from October. These recordings were just recently published. So they're talking about October 2021, 13 months before this coming November election. This plan is for the November election.
Let him go through his presentation that we all can hear, and then we can ask questions afterwards. That would be greatly appreciated.
But seriously, though, that's why we're on the ground, like Rob said, so early, is to address exactly that, right? The Democrats, and I'm just going to go off script and probably not even follow it, so I'm just going to address myself right away. So we are trying to recruit, truly, it's going to be an army, right? We are going to try to recruit lawyers. We're going to have more lawyers than have ever been recruited, because let's be honest, that's where it's going to be fought, right? We're going to have lawyers that work early to build relationships with different judges, so that when that happens, we're going to have lawyers that have relationships with the police chiefs in the different areas.
The police chief, So you're going to have install Republican bad faith poll workers to contest ballots, have them be in touch with lawyers, and the lawyers know the police chiefs, so maybe they can even involve police in helping to skew the elections in their favor.
In the different areas, so that when that happens, those pre-existing relationships are already established, so that they can't lie, or so that they can, I've talked with so many people that work at the TCF Center, and that I've heard that happens. It happened, right? No one is it happened, and it's wrong that it happened. It's 100% wrong that it happened, and we're going to address it. We're going to address it by having the lawyers on the ground. We're going to address it by trying to have this.
So the plan is as follows. In most places, in many places, we'll talk about Detroit, Michigan, because this is one place that this is becoming a very big deal. The poll workers have to be selected from names submitted by each of the parties. Great. So we know that Detroit is a particularly blue part of Michigan. So if you want to skew a state election, you don't know whether a particular voter is a Republican or a Democrat. So you say, okay, well, listen, if Michigan as in general is I don't know what the numbers are. Imagine it's a 52-48 state or a 55-45 Democratic leaning state. But you know Detroit is like 75% Democratic. Great. So what you do is you train a bunch of people to be poll workers who know the process for contesting ballots, say that I don't believe that this is a valid voter. You force them to have to submit a contested ballot, which then has to be adjudicated, and on and on and on. You train them up. And then the list that the Republican Party submits in Detroit, right? They don't have to do this everywhere. You say, we're going to target Detroit because that's where we can make a difference. It's so many Democrats will try to fight the validity of Democratic ballots for no particular reason other than they're Democrats. The list that you submit in Detroit to the county, to the election clerk or the Detroit official that chooses the poll workers, is all these people who have been trained in bad faith, not to prevent fraud, but to try to get votes in Detroit thrown out, which are overwhelmingly likely to be Democratic votes. And so then that's how you skew the results. You let the vote happen in other parts of Michigan that are more 50-50, or even the rural parts of Michigan, which skew Republican. But in Detroit, you send this army of poll workers who are actually bad faith, sort of like undercover political operatives, to try to get Democratic votes discounted. And they've got lawyers ready. They claim they're going to have police chiefs ready. Now, what is happening here is that to win, they increasingly must cheat, at least apparently. Well, why would that be? It's because on the issues, the country is moving more and more to the left. They are losing on the issues. OK, and by the way, I encourage you to listen to these recordings in full. There's an 8-minute recording from an October 5th election integrity training. And then there's another 14-minute recording of a Zoom meeting. And you will very quickly understand the strategy, which we have more or less explained here. If Democrats wait until after it happens, it's going to be too late. And it's really important to understand how monumental the outcome of these midterms will be. Because in 2020, they had a bunch of different strategies they tried. It was the national, can Pence overturn it, alternate slates of electors, objections on January 6th, all these different things. More than 60 court cases which failed, trying to prevent mail-in and absentee ballots. They had all these different things. It didn't work, but it could have. And now they're going to refine the strategy. And 2022 is going to be a test of how much closer can we get to just controlling the election results by using these techniques, so that in 2024, we might be able to just get a president that didn't really win installed in the White House. And there's a second layer to that. It's not just testing the techniques. It's also, can we use the techniques in 2022, we being them? Can we use the techniques in 2022 to get enough control over state positions, including secretaries of state and governors, etc., so that those individuals will be in power in November of 2024 to maybe do what Trump wanted Brad Raffensperger and Brian Kemp to do in Georgia, for example. Remember that?
I need 11,000 votes. Give me a break.
It didn't happen in Georgia. But what about Doug Mastriano in Pennsylvania? Doug Mastriano, the now winner of the Republican gubernatorial primary in Pennsylvania, he's a big lie supporter. And he's worse than that, by the way, if you look at his background. He might be willing to do the things Trump wanted them to do in Georgia in 2024 if he's the governor. So what if they use these techniques to get Mastriano in 2022 so that he will be in power to do this stuff in 2024? We cannot understate the importance of these midterms. So should everyone vote? Of course, that's number one. But the Democratic Party had better be ready to fight this. Now, do they have to fight fire with fire, meaning just set up Democratic poll workers to try to do this exact same thing in Republican areas? Well, number one, I think that that's going low. So I don't think that's the way to do it. And number two, by its nature, because Republicans are more predominant in rural areas with lower populations, Democrats are at a structural disadvantage. Republicans can focus their bad faith poll workers in the densely populated areas. For Democrats to fight that, they would need way more poll workers because you would need them in way more precincts because they're going to be more rural precincts. So it's both a bad idea and a difficult idea logistically because of that. So Democrats need to come up with something. And I don't know what the answer is. I just learned about this story yesterday. I'm still thinking about it. But it is looking very, very rough. Let me know what you think. Find me on Twitter at dpacman. And Tuesday, June 14th at 6 p.m. will be the next David Pakman Show Town Hall. It'll stream live on the Pakman Live YouTube channel. I'll have more information on that between now and then. One of the fastest growing crimes in the U.S. is identity theft, and there's a new victim every 14 seconds. This has happened to me before. I've talked on the show. We got hacked. It was costly. It wasn't a good feeling. And that's why I now protect myself with Aura, one of our sponsors. Protecting your accounts and devices gets complicated because you need a bunch of different tools, and Aura combines them all into one app. Identity theft protection, fraud monitoring, password management, antivirus, all in one place. They monitor email addresses, passwords, social security number, bank accounts, credit cards. If something happens, you get an immediate alert on your phone, and then Aura can help me fix it as well. Aura is letting my audience try it free for 2 weeks at aura.com/Pacman. With the free trial, you can do things like see if your login credentials have been found on the dark web. I saw an old password was in 4 different data breaches. Probably something you want to know, and it's free, so you might as well just use the link down below. We have been on this story from the beginning, and it has now been confirmed exclusively by Newsweek based on a classified report that they've obtained that, yes, Russian President Vladimir Putin has received treatment for cancer and has suffered an assassination attempt, which we will talk about as well. Now, if you've been watching our show, listening to the podcast, this general story would not be new to you. There are many media outlets that have not even talked about this possibility, but our audience, many of you will remember this. It seemed that something was wrong back on April 25th when we reported in a segment called Visibly Bloated Putin Grips Table for Support in New Video that something seemed very wrong. And that was after earlier speculation from some doctors in our audience that something seemed just not quite right with Vladimir Putin. Now, then in May, we reported on the belief that Putin had cancer. It was more specifically being discussed at that point in time. And 3 days after we did that video, Ukraine's head of intelligence, Major General Kirilo Budanov, told UK's Sky News that Putin was in, quote, a very bad psychological and physical condition, and he is very sick. But okay, I mean, that's Ukraine's head of intelligence. It may be accurate, but Ukraine may also have reasons to push that narrative. And the context here is very important because the question we've been asking is, why is Putin acting so seemingly belligerently? This invasion of Ukraine seems like a bad idea. It's now been going on even longer, and it's not clear that it's one that necessarily Russia's going to be able to, quote, win, at least not decisively, at least not without suffering massive losses on which we've already reported. So one of the theory, and I shouldn't say theory, even though I mean theory colloquially. One of the hypotheses or speculations was, if Putin were ill, either as a result of he feels like he has nothing to lose or as a side effect of medication, all speculative, maybe he's not thinking clearly and he's acting belligerently and he wants to go out in some kind of blazing glory, trying to return Russia to the USSR era. You know, again, it was all speculative, but the question was, could something medical maybe relate to why he's behaving in this way? And the answer now appears to be, well, at least maybe, because it now has apparently been confirmed that Putin was treated for cancer, and we're going to talk about what specifically is being reported. A classified U.S. report obtained by Newsweek says that Vladimir Putin has reemerged after undergoing treatment for cancer in April for what they are describing as quite advanced cancer, according to 3 U.S. intelligence leaders from this classified report. The report also confirms that there was an assassination attempt on Putin's life in March. Now, we've seen these videos of when Putin meets with people. He sits very far from them, these cartoonishly long tables, and that applies to other people that work for him within Russia, but also even sometimes when he meets with foreign leaders. And there were 2 speculations there. One speculation is he's worried about an assassination attempt, including maybe that the people even that work for him might turn on him and try to kill him. Now it is learned that there was an assassination attempt in March. Secondly, the speculation was, well, maybe he's just like really afraid of COVID. Maybe because he's immunocompromised as a result of possible treatment that he's receiving. Many cancer treatments and other treatments can suppress your immune system, and that would be another potential explanation. This report doesn't clarify whether it's one, the other, or both, because both things appear to be true. 3 intelligence officials from the Office of the DNI, a retired Air Force senior officer, and an official from the Defense Intelligence Agency say it's difficult to know exactly what's going on, but that number one, the main points of Putin is afraid of assassination attempts and Putin did undergo treatment for cancer. Those 2 points are being reported as being true, according to this classified report. The three intelligence officials also say that this makes the prospect of nuclear war less likely, which has been a concern for a while. They don't elaborate as to why, and I'm not actually sure why they believe this report about Putin's cancer treatment makes nuclear war less likely. Maybe we'll get more information about that. Also interesting, the Russian foreign minister, Sergei Lavrov, a major propagandist, he was asked about this notion of Putin being sick in an interview last weekend on French television, and he straight up denied it. He said, quote, "I don't think that a sane person can suspect any signs of an illness or ailment in this man." And if Sergei Lavrov is so vehemently denying something, it genuinely might point to it being true, because that the guy is just a constant and total liar. So the bottom line here, according to the Defense Intelligence Agency official, is Putin is definitely sick, but whether he is close to death is mere speculation. We just have no idea. Natural question, if someone has undergone cancer treatment, well, what type of cancer? Unclear. The speculation over the last 2 months has been prostate cancer, thyroid cancer, but it is merely speculation at this point. There have also been speculations about Parkinson's or something Parkinsonian. You could have cancer in Parkinson's. There are now, with the cancer piece more in focus, there's also speculation that the Parkinsonian appearance may have been a result of maybe medication or treatment. But again, there are lots of speculative elements. The one that seems to now be out of the realm of speculation and into the line of fact, based on the classified report, is, yes, cancer of some kind and treatment in April. Will we ever know the full truth? Maybe. I don't know. But a very, very interesting report. And it seems that what was believed early on indeed appears to be, at least to some degree, now confirmed. Let's talk about today's mass shooting. I guess it's actually yesterday's. But what a country that when we say the mass shooting, I have to speculate, not the one from last Tuesday and not the one from the previous weekend. I'm talking about the one from yesterday. Another horrifying event. 4 people have been killed in a mass shooting at a Tulsa, Oklahoma. It's sometimes being described as a hospital, maybe more accurately, a medical building. The gunman is also dead. CBS News has a report that contains much of the information we now know. 4 people were killed in a shooting last night, Wednesday evening, in a medical building on a hospital campus in Tulsa, Oklahoma. The gunman is also dead, apparently from a self-inflicted gunshot wound. Tulsa Police Department Captain Richard Muhlenberg told CNN multiple people were wounded. He said it was fewer than 10. No one had wounds considered life-threatening. So 4 dead, the shooter dead, an additional up to 10 people wounded with non-life-threatening injuries. He told the Associated Press that the medical complex was a, quote, catastrophic scene. The identities of the victims and the gunman haven't been released as of this moment. By the time this story publishes, maybe some of that will have been released. The motive wasn't immediately known. The shooting occurred a little before 5 on the campus of St. Francis Hospital. Officers were there within 3 minutes, made contact with the gunman within another 5 minutes. The police chief says, "I was very happy with what we know so far regarding the response of our officers." Certainly an allusion to the response at the Texas shooting, for sure. Officers encountered the suspect on the 2nd floor of the hospital's Natalie building. The gunman is a black male believed to be between 35 and 40, armed with a long gun and a handgun. Both weapons appear to have been fired. The officers that did arrive were hearing shots in the building, and that's what directed them to the 2nd floor. So listen, this is another one of these things where the details are catastrophic. The death toll is tragic. It's yet another shooting. But as always, I find it important to remind you that there have now been 20 mass shootings since last week's shooting in Texas. This is sort of like the next mass shooting that made the news in a national way. But if you look at gunviolencearchive.org and you go back to the day of the Texas shooting, where, of course, 22 were killed and 17 injured, there was a shooting in Philly, in Stanwood, Michigan, in Anniston, Alabama, Memphis, Tennessee, Colorado Springs, one in Florida, one in California, another one in Tennessee, Chicago, Henderson, Nevada, on and on and on. There have been 20 of these. There was a shooting just 2 days ago in Charleston, South Carolina, where thankfully no one was killed, but 10 individuals were injured. Waco, Texas had a shooting with 4 people injured on Tuesday. And then we get to this shooting yesterday in Tulsa, Oklahoma, with 5 killed. That includes the shooter. The number injured has not yet been updated on gunviolencearchive.org. So it is not, it would be bad enough if we had the Buffalo shooting and the Texas shooting and the Tulsa shooting. But in between that, we've had dozens more shootings, and it just doesn't stop. Now, after the break, I'm going to be speaking with Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin. Many of you have said, David, you should really talk to Jamie Raskin. He's a true progressive, and he really cares. And if anybody's going to get things done in this Congress, it's going to be Jamie Raskin. Well, I'm going to speak to him after the break. And one of the questions I have for him, because we've been hearing anecdotally, this time it's different. This time it's going to be a different thing. It's not going to be the same again. I'm going to ask Jamie Raskin, is there actually any willingness from Republicans to do something about gun safety regulations this time? Or is it going to be that same vicious cycle of thoughts and prayers and no, we can't touch guns that we've seen so many times before? That's after the break. Make sure to find us on Instagram at David Pakman Show. Don't forget that the best way to support the David Pakman Show is by becoming a member, which gives you access to the daily bonus show, the regular show with no commercials. You also get access to our entire archive of every episode dating back a really long time and plenty of other awesome membership perks. Go to joinpakman.com and use the coupon code BETTER21 for a huge discount. Joinpakman.com. It's great to welcome to the program today Democratic Congressman Jamie Raskin, who represents Maryland's 8th Congressional District, was the lead House manager in the second impeachment trial of former President Donald Trump. Congressman, it's so great to have you on.
I'm delighted to be with you, David. Thank you for having me.
So, okay, to start with, we're going to have, starting with in prime time on June 9th, these public hearings related to the January 6th committee. And there are sort of two opposing forces here. There's one side, yourself included, who have been saying what's going to be revealed during those hearings is going to be mind-blowing. That's my term, not necessarily a term that you have used. The other side is this feeling that nothing's really going to happen. Nobody's ultimately going to be held accountable for what happened. What can you say to those in my audience who are in that latter group who are concerned about lack of accountability?
This is all part of the process of making the events of January 6th visible, comprehensible to people, and making them the basis of real accountability. Now, some of that accountability is legal accountability, and that's really within the realm of the Department of Justice. Which has brought more than 800 prosecutions in the most sweeping investigation in the history of the DOJ. Obviously, we're all on the edge of our seats to see if they're going to work their way all the way up to the top, or whether Trump, as a kind of mob boss, is able to insulate himself with several layers of buffer between him and the criminal actions and the legal consequences of those actions. But I do think that the investigation is proceeding apace, and they're working their way up the way that a lot of organized crime investigations work their way up the ladder. But then there's public and political accountability, and that's really what the January 6th Select Committee is all about. I mean, under House Resolution 503, our job is to report to Congress and to the American people about what happened on January 6th and what were the causes behind it, and then to make recommendations about how to fortify our institutions going forward.
Do you expect some of your colleagues in the House may have legal liability?
Well, you know, first of all, again, that's not really our role. In other words,
Understood.
we are we're turning over evidence of people who are in contempt of Congress because they refuse to participate. For example, Dan Scavino and Peter Navarro, they never gave a single document to the committee. They never spent 1 minute testifying. They just blew us off. Mark Meadows was kind of 1 foot in and 1 foot out doing the hokey pokey, gave us some stuff, and then Trump got mad, withdrew. Steve Bannon's blown us off. We've turned all of that information over to the Department of Justice. We've voted to hold them in contempt, and now it's up to the executive branch and the DOJ to enforce that. In terms of evidence of other crimes, we're in the process of laying them out there. In the John Eastman litigation, when Judge Carter was dealing with Eastman's claim that he was somehow covered by attorney-client privilege, the judge asked the question, well, was there an attorney-client privilege? Was it waived? And does it even apply if it existed because of the crime fraud exception? And we said there was no attorney-client privilege. If there was, it was waived. And in any event, it doesn't apply because all of these crimes were committed and we set them forth. And Judge Carter basically adopted what we had to say. So we've not been shy about setting forth statutory offenses. But look, as much as we all would like to see Donald Trump and others in his inner echelon held legally accountable, far more important is whether or not we can solidify our democratic institutions and keep the engines of democracy turning. I mean, that's just so much more important than, how Donald Trump spends the remaining years of his life, whether it's behind bars or somewhere else. I care a lot more about whether or not we are going to be able to bequeath the democracy, a working, functional democracy, to our children and our grandchildren, because the autocrats, the dictators, the despots are on the march all over the world. And from Moscow to Mar-a-Lago, they're working to undermine democratic process and to drain life from our institutions. And we've got to make sure we've got something to give our kids.
Yeah, to that end, I mean, it seems very clear that at least to some degree, some of the people who are trying to avoid coming before your committee are trying to run out the clock, knowing that if Republicans take the House in November and are sworn in January, this committee is essentially over. Is your plan to be done long before that in order to prevent an interruption before you're done with your work as a result of the election?
Yeah, we're able to have our hearings begin June 9th. There will be 6 hearings at least that take place in the month of June. There will be perhaps another hearing or two in the future to deliver the recommendations of the committee, and there will be a report. And we're hoping to have all of that done early in the fall. It's not just our committee that ends with this Congress. Everything ends with this Congress because House of Representatives, unlike the Senate, is a newly constituted body every 2 years. We come to the end of the Congress and then there's a new Congress that forms. The Senate, because of the overlapping nature of their terms, is a continuing body. They only lose 1/3 of their members, or 1/3 of their members are up for re-election, whereas our entire body's up for re-election, and we adopt new rules at the beginning of the House and so on. So it's not any kind of strategic political calculus. It's just that we've got to get this done before this session of Congress ends.
Okay, when it comes to gun safety, there have been some of your colleagues who have said something feels different this time. We've seen a couple of Republicans, including Adam Kinzinger and Congressman Jacobs, who have said, I actually have a new position when it comes to either an assault weapons ban or AR-15. There's something that might be a little bit different this time. But we've seen this cycle for a long time, which is there's a mass shooting. Everybody says we must do something. Republicans come in and say, oh, yeah, sure, but that can include actually dealing with gun safety. And then there's no major shooting in the news for a couple of weeks and nothing happens, and it's rinse repeat for year after year after year. Is your genuine opinion that this is going to be that same cycle, or that maybe something will be different this time?
Well, my colleagues senior to me believe it is going to be the exact same thing it's been before, because the NRA exerts such a stranglehold over the GOP, and in the final analysis, they will refuse to move. On the other hand, I'm of the mind that the Republicans think that they are in a place where they can actually seize control of the House and the Senate, and they can win these elections. They've obviously been vilifying and demonizing Joe Biden, and yet they're starting to realize that the public is overwhelmingly against them on all the big issues. I mean, they are the dog that caught the car when it comes to destroying Roe versus Wade and the constitutional right to privacy.
Yep.
So that creates explosive political conditions where the women of America can turn en masse against the GOP and what they've done to destroy women's reproductive freedom. Similarly, the gun violence is so out of control and so dangerous and frightening to people that they could experience a similar earthquake with young people in America who just say enough is enough. And the young people who really rocked American politics from Parkland, Florida, with the March for Our Lives, are organizing another march. And people are saying that hundreds of thousands or maybe even 1 million people could come to Washington. So I think that the GOP may have the sense that their big chance to do what they really care about most, which is taking power, could all be squandered because of the recklessness of their policies. And so that would argue that they might try to do something so that they're not so clearly the party that is tagged with all these massacres. One of my constituents wrote me the other day with the idea that the massacres should be named after the Republican members of Congress and the senators whose districts and states they represent, when those are the members who are doing nothing to get us a universal violent criminal background check, doing nothing to close the gun show loophole, the internet loophole, the private sale loophole, doing nothing to take weapons of war out of the hands of 18-year-olds and, essentially reduce the slaughter, which puts America into a class completely of its own. I mean, we're suffering gun casualties 20 times, 25, 50 times higher than other industrialized countries. And it's all because of our gun.
On that note, many of my liberal friends who are for all sorts of different gun safety regulations, which I know you support and which I support, also are of the mindset that they don't love the idea of only the right wingers having the guns, and they are increasingly seeking firearms themselves and obtaining them, almost like a race to the bottom of sorts, if you will. Do you sympathize with that fear? Does that make sense to you to some degree?
Well, I mean, the Supreme Court, of course, in Heller versus District of Columbia, said that the core of the individual right under the Second Amendment is the right of self-defense in your home. And people have that right. That's deeply anchored in American culture and law. So if there are people who are fearful for that reason, and they feel that firearms will keep them safe, they have a right to exercise their Second Amendment rights in that way. Of course, the liberals in the Supreme Court had advanced the traditional view, which is that the Second Amendment is about the right to possess guns in connection with militia service. In other words, you read the prefatory clause, a well-regulated militia being necessary to the survival of a free state, comma, in conjunction with the operative clause, the right of the people to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. In any event, the conservative majority won on that, but even Justice Scalia was emphatic that reasonable gun regulation is totally within the contemplation of the Second Amendment. And you don't have to sell assault weapons to anybody, and you don't have to allow kids to get weapons, and you don't have to allow people to take weapons in public places. I hope we have not arrived at Civil War style conditions. But I think it's perfectly healthy for people across the political spectrum to exercise their Second Amendment rights, but it's also perfectly healthy for us to understand what Second Amendment rights really are,
Right.
and what the authority of government is to guarantee public safety, because that's essential to the social contract. And the whole reason we get into a social contract, if you read Locke and Hobbes and Rousseau, is that we surrender the rights of violent self-help in exchange for security in a civil society. But the Republicans who refuse to do nothing essentially, give us the worst of both worlds. They compel kids to go to school under the truancy laws, under the mandatory attendance laws, but then they leave them as sitting ducks because they won't do anything to keep them safe from mass slaughter with assault weapons.
Congressman, last thing I want to ask you about, and I know our time is not unlimited. I'm not an advocate of a primary challenge to Joe Biden. I think if Joe Biden decides to run for re-election, that he should be the Democratic nominee from a strategic point of view. That being said, when people say to me, David, is there anyone you think would be interesting to see as the Democratic nominee? To be totally honest, I think of you. I think of Jon Ossoff. I think Jon Ossoff would be very interesting. I know that it would be a crazy thing to ask you. If it's something you're thinking about, you would never answer it. It would be inappropriate. It would be a crazy thing to ask. But my more specific question is, one of the things I do think is, I think that unfortunately, because of anti-Semitism on both the right and some on the left, I think Jewish presidential candidates would still struggle because of anti-Semitism. What's your opinion about that issue in America right now?
I hadn't really thought that through, David. Let me see. And I wonder if you're asking me this because I happen to be in New Hampshire campaigning for my friends Chris Pappas and Annie Custer and for Senator Maggie Hassan. Look, I think it's really important for the young people of America to understand, and the kids of America to understand, despite what they might see on the internet and despite what they might hear from some people in public office, we are not a racist country. We are not an anti-Semitic country. We are not a sexist, misogynistic country. We are not an immigrant bashing country. And I believe so much in what Tom Paine saw when he got to America. I mean, he said, this country could become an asylum for humanity. Not an insane asylum, mind you, but it could become a place of refuge for people fleeing from every form of political, religious, economic repression and discrimination on earth. And I think despite what we've lived with through Donald Trump and the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers and the militia groups and the Three Percenters, and despite all of the divisiveness and the polarization, I still believe we are the world's greatest multiracial, multi-religious, multi-ethnic constitutional democracy. And the sky's the limit for what we can make happen for our people once we fight off all of these authoritarian, racist attacks on our country. So, there would be a lot of reasons that I wouldn't run for president, but being Jewish would not be one of them.
Congressman Jamie Raskin, I really appreciate your time, and we're going to be watching next week as the hearings start very closely. Thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having me, David.
If you value what we do at the David Pakman Show, remember to support us on Patreon. Go to patreon.com/David Pakman Show, where you can get access to behind the scenes videos, the daily bonus show, the commercial free daily show, as well as special discounts on merch, including hats, hoodies, mugs, and t-shirts. You can support the show for as little as $2 a month. Check it out at patreon.com/David Pakman Show. Our friends from The Good Liars have done it again. Davram and Jason from The Good Liars were at the NRA conference over the weekend. They asked a guy in a Confederate flag shirt, is he for slavery or is he against slavery? And the guy didn't want to comment. Now, in my world, if you don't say I'm against slavery, you might be in favor of it, but I'll let you guys be the judge of that. These are extremely good videos that the guys have been doing. This is Jason interviewing this guy. Guy's wearing a black Make America Great Again hat and a Keep Flying Confederate flag shirt. The topic is, well, that connects to slavery. Are you for or against slavery? And the guy pleads the fifth on the easiest question in the world. Take a look at this.
Just keep it flying.
Keep it flying? And why do you want to keep it flying?
Why would anybody want to erase our heritage?
Well, some people would say that flag symbolizes racism, it symbolizes slavery, and they might have some valid points there.
That's their opinion, they're welcome to their opinion if they want it.
Are you pro-slavery or against slavery?
I have no comment.
No comment, guys. He is not going to weigh in on that controversial, venomous political issue.
Thank you for the interview.
I'll give you one more chance. Pro or anti-slavery?
No comment.
I'll give you.
Does he know you can be against slavery and still like guns? I mean, I don't know. It's a very I would not want to leave any doubt in my position on slavery.
One more opportunity to say if you're pro or anti-slavery.
No comment.
All right. Well, there you have it. No comment on the if you're in favor of slavery or not.
Just keep
It is it's a real gotcha question. Are you for or against slavery? Now, let's be very honest with ourselves and each other. We shouldn't be shocked that some of the people with the Confederate flag gear are pro-slavery. That's what the Confederacy was fighting to preserve at the end of the day. I know that it's so common, it's almost cliche that when you say to someone who loves the Confederate flag paraphernalia, you say, this stands for slavery, this stands for racism, and so on. They go, no. I'm against all those things. For me, it stands for heritage or, whatever the case may be. And maybe for some of them, that's plausibly true. But at a certain point, the people that are still using the Confederate paraphernalia, some of them are going to be for slavery. And it seems like the guys at the Good Liars may have found such a guy. Really disturbing stuff. And again, we've talked about this overlap. The NRA claims to be a nonpartisan organization. They're just about gun rights. It's overwhelmingly Republicans. It's overwhelmingly wrapped up with Christianity. It's overwhelmingly wrapped up with conspiratorial Trumpism. I mean, we saw literally the Christian pastor that Trump brought up on the stage during his NRA speech, who said, I believe you're still the president. You're still my president. Extremist right-wing Christian pastor, NRA member. So we've got to admit and understand that overlap exists, and how we deal with it, I don't know. There's some interesting news, which is it's good news, but it's also not nearly enough. New York is going to be raising the age to buy an assault rifle from 18 to 21, and New York is going to be banning body armor. Widely reported, including by Bloomberg, Governor Kathy Hochul and legislative leaders pledged to raise the legal age to purchase an AR-15 assault rifle in New York to 21 from 18, and pass a package of measures to tighten gun laws before the end of the state's legislative session this week. Citing the mass shootings in Buffalo, New York, and Uvalde, Texas, Local officials say they want to close loopholes and address the gaps in laws exposed by the back-to-back massacres. The bills would prohibit the purchase of body armor for civilians, require a license to purchase a semi-automatic rifle, make threatening mass harm a crime, and strengthen the state's red flag laws. The measures would also require new pistols to have micro-stamping technology, which uses lasers to imprint markings to make it easier to trace guns to registered owners. Illinois, Washington, Hawaii, and Florida have already raised the age from 18 to 21 for assault rifles. So this is great, right? But neighboring Pennsylvania, you still only have to be 18 to buy an assault rifle. In neighboring New Jersey, you still have to be only 18 to buy an assault rifle. And in New Jersey, adults can buy and use bulletproof vests and body armor unless you have a felony conviction. And in Pennsylvania, there are no extra body armor regulations besides federal laws. So in Pennsylvania, adults can still buy and use bulletproof vests. And you could say, well, but David, it would be against the law to cross state lines or right. Yeah, but it's still extraordinarily easy to do. And so you get the idea. We need some kind of broader, probably federal legislation on a lot of this stuff. Now, one of the things we have to remember is if the crime is going to be where there's more population, and we've got a piece planned on this issue of the gun violence is in so-called Democrat cities. You all know, as I've explained before, cities in general lean Democratic, and high crime cities and low crime cities are basically run by Democrats. Democrats just live in cities, and crime is more prevalent where there is more population density. So we might understand, well, the population centers are where you're going to see more crime. But if it's that easy for people to go to Jersey and Pennsylvania for the weapons, or to go from Chicago into Indiana, this type of thing might actually backfire statistically in what shows up. Good for New York City, good for the state of New York, but we really need a national effort here. Now, in terms of 18 versus 21, I would actually go to 25 on semi-automatic assault weapons. Now, you might say, but David, why not ban them altogether? Sure, I'm trying to be realistic to some degree. And when you look at the ages of many of these mass shooters, you have a situation where you've overwhelmingly got shooters under 25 using a semi-automatic assault rifles. So you could deal with a ton of the mass shootings specifically by targeting those firearms and those individuals. Now, of course, we should be doing much more. And as I've said before, what you do to deal with gun suicides versus individual gun homicides versus mass shootings, 3 different problems, 3 different sets of solutions. We talked about this Tuesday on the bonus show with Pat, but this is at least one thing that can be done. And, unfortunately, in my interview in the last segment, Congressman Jamie Raskin was not super optimistic that this time it's going to go differently in terms of getting Republicans on board to actually do something. But even though it's not enough, even though it doesn't go far enough, even though it's not happening in enough places to make a difference yet, New York is at least doing something. Listen, Canada is doing more as a result of mass shootings in the United States than the United States is doing. And we'll talk about that on the bonus show. We have a voicemail number. That number is 219-2-DAVID-P. You know, yesterday I played a voicemail where someone corrected my pronunciation of the city in Texas where the recent mass shooting took place. And I explained, the problem is, for me, I see, as a native Spanish speaker, I see it, and for me, it's Uvalde. And so I don't know if it's Uvalde or Uvalde. These are all incorrect anglicized pronunciations. For me, it's Uvalde. But I don't tend to use those pronunciations because people get all worked up about it. The voicemail I received about it, case in point, refers to my Spanish pronunciations as exaggerated. That's my whole point. They're not exaggerated. They're just the pronunciations. Listen to this.
David, I just wanted to say I love it when you do your sort of exaggerated Spanish pronunciation.
This is exactly, he says he loves it, but he's still calling them exaggerated. I don't find it offensive. I just find it funny that just the real pronunciations attract so much attention and are called exaggerated. They're just the pronunciations. It's sort of like if I say apple, wow, what an exaggerated American pronunciation of that. No, that's just how you say apple in English. It's like if I'm speaking in Spanish and I refer to the former president of the United States, I say Donald Trump. It's not an exaggerated English pronunciation. It's just the pronunciation
of names and words. I find it very refreshing, and I find it delightful to listen to.
Good.
I don't know how to say Uvalde. In fact, whenever I hear the word, my brain immediately goes to Vivaldi.
Yes, of course, the composer of the Four Seasons and many other great pieces.
Italian Baroque composer who wrote the Four Seasons, among
There it
other
is.
things. Maybe on the bonus show, when you have time, maybe you can, I know you talk about baseball sometimes, maybe you can read the starting lineups of your favorite team or something and pronounce all the names for us. That would be a lot of fun. Thanks, David. I love the show, and take care.
We'll turn it into a we'll turn it into a sideshow. JD Martinez. That'll be a special that if we get to our 1.5 million subscribers, I'll just read Spanish names. All right. Okay. Anyway, it's not a big deal, but it is funny. On the bonus show today, by the way, we will talk about, following the Uvalde school shooting, Canada is proposing new gun safety regulations. Canada is doing more as a result of the school shooting in the U.S. than the U.S. is doing, at least for now. We are going to talk about one of the victims that was shot in the Brooklyn subway mass shooting, another recent mass shooting. She is suing the gun maker Glock for damages, and we're going to talk about the impact of such a lawsuit. And we have not spoken about this on the show or the bonus show at all, but it is finally over, other than all of the appeals that are coming. The Johnny Depp Amber Heard case is finally over. It has captivated much of the country, although I don't know that my audience has been that interested in it, for weeks, if not months. Johnny Depp mostly won his defamation case against Amber Heard. My interest in it now are the extrapolations that are being made about the Me Too movement, about male victims of domestic violence, and so many different things. So we will finally address it now that it's over, mostly, on the bonus show. Sign up for the bonus show at joinpacman.com. You can use the coupon code BIGVOTING22. But remember, Alex Jones hates the bonus show.
Oh, the bonus show where you want to make money. Everybody else that makes money to fund themselves is bad.
Right.
Thank your lucky stars every day you're not Dave Pacman.
Well, many people do. Okay, thank you, Alex. You can sign up at joinpacman.com. Coupon code BIGVOTING22. All of those stories and more today. Thanks a lot for watching today's show. I just want to take a second to tell you about today's sponsors. I protect all of my passwords, accounts, and devices using Aura. I get instant alerts about threats, like if my email or password are found on the dark web, so I can fix the problem fast. Try Aura free for 2 weeks using my link below.